I've talked to people that this thing looked at it like it wanted to murder them, but it didn't. Something was stopping it. It was me. I'll say I'm the witness. It was it. There was nothing in between us. He wasn't even armed. And this thing was looking at him with murderous red eyes, putting the fear of God in him, but it never took a step. It let him go. It happens over and over and over again. And it's almost as if there's a rule, though some of them break that rule. There's a rule that they're not supposed to hurt us. It took me a long time to hear the same pattern over and over before I realized, Jesus, they're all saying the same thing. Like this thing wanted it. There's no way. I mean, sometimes I look at you with pity. I've talked to guys where it saved their life, pulled them drowning out of a creek, reached in, snatched him out, threw him up, and looked on and smelled him and just stood up and walked away. And there are the other stories. There's a subset of these things that really don't like us. And maybe it's for good reason. I don't know. It seems like there is an unspoken rule. When I say that, what I'm really telling you, there's another party involved here. There's them, there's us, and there's the rule maker, the one that's in the shadows that has told these things. Don't mess with the humans. Just leave them alone. If you see them, walk away. And they'll do that, but sometimes they look at you, they want to murder you. They give you the murderous look before they turn to walk away. But something stops them. There's some kind of a rule that they're not allowed to break. And that means, in my opinion, there's another party involved here. There's another party involved here. There's another party involved here. There's another party involved here.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
Enjoy the journey.
The Smithsonian, that if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
Well, welcome back to the Blurryverse.
We're all here.
Luke's always trying to snipe me. Luke just wants to chat. He just wants to be chummy and chatty.
You know what?
I'm like ready to go.
I just like when you get all into it, and then I just try to trip you up a little bit, get you off your mark.
You do. I'm like ready to go. Okay, we're ready to go on stage, and Luke's like, I forgot something. Like, what? We got to go out. The show's on right now.
You should tune to Drop D. We're playing metal.
Look at you. No one dropped D. But anyways, thank you guys out there. People have been telling everyone about our podcast so much that sometimes people are like, hey, everyone's coming into my Bigfoot Museum talking about Blurry Creatures. Who are you guys? What is this? I gotta come on your show. And that's what happened today. So our people out there listening to the show, you guys are such hardcore fans of what we're doing. We don't understand it still, but you love it and you tell people about it. So thank you. And this one's for you because you made this happen. Whoever is out there going to Bigfoot museums, you know who you are.
You're our tribe. You're our people. We're glad to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing like going to see all the fine things that the big guys left behind.
That's right.
You know, it's kind of like going to Ken Walker's freezer. You never know what you're going to find in there.
No, I love it. People are so into this. They start museums, and we've yet to start the Blurry Creatures Cafe, but who knows?
Yeah, we do have coffee, though, Nate.
We do have coffee, yeah.
We've partnered with Valiant Coffee to produce some Blurry Creatures blends.
Beans. Blurry beans.
Beans, beards, Blurry Creatures.
Bone Zone.
No, but we partnered with a fantastic coffee company out of Northern California, close to where we grew up, Nate. Valiant, and we're doing some fun things. So if you are a coffee drinker and you like your coffee just a little weird on the outside and good on the inside, you head over to blurrycreatures.com and check out our coffee project. It's just something fun. There's the UFO espresso blend. We've got Sleepy Sasquatch for all of you decaf drinkers. No matcha yet, Nate. I know that that's your thing.
I'm waiting. Yeah.
Mothman matcha.
Yeah.
We're ready for it. It's coming.
That's right. Look at you. You're ready.
Dude, I'm ready.
Luke's just on brand today.
Trying to be. I got my Mike Heiser hat on. I'm feeling blurry.
You guys are fun out there. The show's grown a lot. You know, sometimes you just need to drink coffee because we get in trouble, Luke, whether we say something or we don't say something.
Right.
Just drink your coffee.
Coffee. You say it best and you say nothing at all, Nate.
No, people get mad when we don't say anything. So, what can we do? We're a lose-lose situation here on Blurry Creatures, but we're having fun.
I feel like it's a win-win. Because you know what we do, Nate?
What?
Dude, we go straight. This is not this episode.
Yeah, we might be going to the Bone Zone today.
We might, dude.
You never know when you go to the Bone Zone. All right. Yeah, lots of good stuff in the pipe. We got a lot of great shows. I think last month we had 8 episodes come out. Luke, the most Blurry Creatures episodes in 1 month. How do you feel? New record.
Blurred hard, man. Last month went to 11.
Yeah.
All the way up.
Well, we have a brand new fall pre-sale for merch going right now. You can get some new hoodies, some crew necks. We got some vintage dyed crew necks. And you can get those at blurrycreatures.com/store. Head over, pre-order some of your fall gear. It's hard to keep these things in stock, so pre-order is the way we do it. If you want to get some blurry gear, blurrycreatures.com/store. Support the show. Luke's been shipping like a madman. He heads up the store and he does a great job. But today we're bringing on the Expedition Bigfoot Museum curator down in Georgia, David Bakara. So he's got just a mountain of stories, and we try to pick out some good ones.
Yeah, fascinating guy. Ex-member of the BFRO in Florida. If you spent any time in the Bigfoot space, you know that there are chapters of Bigfoot researchers that all over the country. If you ever watched Finding Bigfoot, of course they haven't found him yet, but the irony in that. But they talk about the BFRO a lot in the local chapters there. So David cut his teeth, if you will, in doing that. And you know, he's a data guy, as you said, Nate. Like he's sitting in archives and a compilation of collected stories from people that just come in, you know, find him and find him to be the ear that they want to tell the story. And I think it paints a very interesting story about this creature that we started this entire podcast sort of talking about. Hey, things don't really appear to be as we're told. And so David's a great guy. Doesn't do a lot of podcasts. He's old school. He's a wealth of knowledge, and we're excited to really tap into that today.
All right, let's get Dave on the show.
David, how are you? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, great. Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
I love that background.
Sorry.
I want to hang out in your living room
thanks.
or office or wherever that is.
I fired up my computer, and of course, Chrome wanted to update. Then I got that done, and then Zoom wanted to update. It was like, man. Okay.
Dave, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Nate, and
I'm Luke.
Hey guys, nice to meet you.
And apparently, a lot of our listeners have been hounding you. So
yeah, yep.
I love them. They're the greatest, the weirdest bunch out there. We love them.
Cool. Yeah, you came highly recommended, and I checked you out, and I was like, wow, this guy's got a lot of good stuff. So
thanks.
I heard you got a lot of good stuff as well. So this is just the compilation of good stuff,
right?
All in one little virtual Zoom meeting. So great to have you. Thanks for reaching out, and we're really excited to hear your story and stories.
Yeah, I have a few for you.
We're ready. Lay it on us here.
Hey, we're pretty chill. We have fun. We try to make this exciting fun. We have a little bit of an 80s flair. Mm-hmm. That's our generation. So we market the show with a little bit of 80s.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you had some good times in the 80s, though.
Yes, I did. I was a bartender.
Hey, you probably still got those leg warmers somewhere.
That's right.
And it's your last name is Bakara? Is that right?
That's right on.
All right.
Yep.
I got it, Luke.
You want to start the show or what, Nate?
Yeah. We'll just hop in, Dave.
I was just gonna. Where you guys are you from? Where are you broadcasting from?
Nashville.
Oh, Nashville.
We're in
nice.
Nashville. Yeah.
Either side. We don't actually live. We're not city guys. So Nate's a little north, and I'm south. We're about an hour from each other.
Cool.
It's funny. We were talking to I was talking to a buddy today who was like, "Yeah, see, Nate, you guys get together," and like, no, we've only ever done one episode in the same room, and we're like 100 and almost 109. What are we at? Nate?
We did our whole conference in the same room.
Well, I mean, like an episode was with our good friend Tony Merkel from the Confessionals, but that was in an actual studio, and so. You know, we're just Middle Tennessee, generally speaking.
Oh, great place to be from, my friend.
What about yourself?
I live in the mountains of
love
North
that.
Georgia. I live on the top of a mountain. I get a little nervous when I have to go outside and lock my chickens up in the middle of the night. If I forget to lock the chickens up, because there's so many sightings around here, and one from a guy that was locking his ducks up. I think about that a lot, and I go, I just really don't want to run into one of these things in the middle of the night. I know they're up here. Thankfully.
Oh, Bigfoot?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's coming. Dude, he likes chicken. He's got a taste for it.
He does. They do have a taste. I'll tell you a story about a family of them. I talked to a witness in South Carolina. Mother and father were standing outside the chicken coop. The little boy was holding up the chicken, and the little girl, daughter, Bigfoot, was in the chicken coop, grabbing chickens, handing it to his brother, and the brother would hand it to the mother. And the father was standing there staring down the little girl, and she couldn't move until the little girl had got every chicken out. And the mother and father's hands were full, and then the mother walked off with the chickens. The kids walked right behind her, and the dad just stared, just stared just gave this little kid a bad stare, which I've always found interesting. Why a 7-foot powerful animal would look at a child human. That doesn't always happen, but what would put the fear into a little human that could never hurt
It's like
him.
no threat. Yeah, zero
No threat at all, but they'll do that sometimes. So for some of these things, they have a real hatred for us. It doesn't matter how old you are.
Man.
What a way to start, Dave.
Yeah,
I like that. Out the just coming in hot.
You kicked it off, and David Bakara, you're the curator of the expedition Bigfoot, the Sasquatch Museum in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Georgia, and we love this because you probably have people coming in your doors every day telling you the wildest stuff, and probably people who they've had some experience of their own, and they probably just drive by and they're like, I got to stop in here and check this out. And it's really cool. I was actually the first Bigfoot museum I went to was the one in Felton, California.
Mike Rugg's place. I haven't been there, but I know of Mike Rugg. Yeah.
Okay. And I was in there for like an hour. All my friends were like, let's get out of here. Nate, you're a nerd. I'm over this. And I'm like fascinated by this guy. He was talking for a while, but that's where we grew up, Northern California, which is Bigfoot country. And no idea that I would be doing a podcast about this stuff all these years later. But Luke and I started talking about Bigfoot. And then we started talking about giants and alternate history. And and then just got into a lot of heavy, deep, weird theology, and the show's kind of taken a life of its own. But welcome to the podcast. You can take this wherever you want. You can talk about whatever you want. We try to filter things through a biblical worldview, and that gets us into all kinds of different weeds. We do ask everyone on the top of the show, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot? What do you think it is? And after all these years,
so
tell us that, and then get into your history and how you got into all this.
I mean, that's actually a good question to start it off, because normally if I ask somebody, or if it came up with a conversation, I'll talk to a Bigfooter and I said, hey, so what do you think they are? And I do that a lot, especially when I talk to a witness that's had maybe more than one encounter, which is rare, but it does happen. So what do you think Bigfoot is? And if they tell me, oh, it's just an undiscovered ape, I'm done. I'm done talking to you. I'll be nice, but there's nothing, you're not going to tell me anything that I'm looking to know. And when I ask somebody, so what do you think Bigfoot is, especially to a seasoned researcher, he goes, ooh, that's the guy I want to talk to. Because I've been doing since I was 12, consuming books and documentaries, a lot of the same stuff you guys watch. But when I became a investigator with the Florida chapter of the BFRO, I started getting in front of witnesses. It didn't take long, like maybe my second or third case, when I was standing in front of a witness, that he started telling me things. I was like, what? And so when I tell you what I think Bigfoot is, it's not because I slept on it or I saw some effing movie. It's because what I've heard over and over and over again. Let me show you something. Hold on 1 second. Let me grab something.
Yeah. This is an L.A. Marzulli moment right here.
I know. For those who are listening, David's pulling out his briefcase of Bigfoot stuff, probably.
I got a whole stack of these behind me.
What are those, David?
Those are my witness reports we put at the museum.
Oh, wow.
Behind me, under my computer thing, I've got a stack of them, about 12 of them. That's maybe 2 weeks worth of reports.
Wow.
I have stacks of reports that I can't even get to. So when I tell you, it isn't because I read a book. It's because I'm standing in front of people that are telling me things that they tell other researchers. But other researchers go, he's just hallucinating. until the guy in front of you is a police officer, or he's active military, or he's visiting because his current military officer, his commander, confided in something that he saw. So he came to the museum and told me what his commander saw, and this changed his whole view of reality. So this thing goes. It's funny you should have mentioned ancient civilizations and alternate history, because all of it goes hand in hand. Bigfoot isn't a standalone subject like a lot of investigators, TV people would make you think. We're looking for this undiscovered ape. In fact, all these mysteries are connected, and they're connected to a past that's hidden from us. All of it is hidden. And so to answer the long answer to what Bigfoot is, it's exactly the opposite of what they're telling you it is. All them TV people are telling you it's this rare relic hominid. Well, if it's rare, how come this lady over in Clayton, Georgia saw one just outside, just almost inside the city limits, cooking breakfast? Or the guy 2 miles down brought me a footprint he cast about 2 weeks before, so fresh that the plaster was almost still wet. Or this other guy saw one hunting just outside town. Or this guy saw one carry off 50-pound bag of chicken. A lot of these happened right inside city limits in Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida. So how can these things be everywhere and nowhere at the same time? So I think the first hurdle people have to understand is that the sightings aren't rare at all. They're just rarely get to a investigator that has an output to get them to you. A lot of the guys, they get those sightings, they omit them, they clean them up, and then they put them in a book. And if you don't read his book, you don't get those sightings. Well, all the sightings I get, I just put them free on my Facebook page. I don't think I should be making money on other people's sightings, basically. They give me for free.
Right.
Bigfoot's not from around here. If he is from around here, he's from an ancient part of this earth that we're not aware of. And we're not aware of it because it's been hidden from us. We're just like in elementary school. Our brain's here. I've talked to people that have seen them come and go, step into some sort of alternate reality, just come and go through a window that closes up behind them, or step into a tree, hit a tree, and the tree kind of glistens. And they walk into the tree, and the tree goes out, and then there's just the tree there. When you try to stomach all the sightings that come to us, and then you hear people say, they're very rare, there's only a few. You're like, no, they're white, they're brown, they have a human face, they have an ape face. And then you get into the whole, I'll tell you the thing that breaks the whole relic hominid ape thing down is all these dogman reports.
Yeah.
The guys, the established researchers that are on TV anyway, don't want to talk about dogman because it blows the whole relic hominid theory completely to pieces. It demolishes it. This Gigantopithecus, which is just a made-up name, and the Gigantopithecus model you see is nothing but it's just artwork. They found some teeth and some jaw fragments, and they told the guy, "Hey, can you draw us a giant ape?" Yeah. So he drew a giant ape, and they go, "Well, there it is." They said, "No, it's just a piece of artwork, man." They have no idea what this apish thing with these kind of teeth. They have a little idea how long it lived, maybe. And maybe what it ate, but they don't know what. So to answer the long question, what is Bigfoot, which is probably the most important question you can ask, it's just not what 99% of us think it is. It's something much cooler, much more interesting they want us to think it is.
I love that answer. It seems like there's varieties and species and different, how many different types of Bigfoot creatures, do you think there are? Because it definitely seems like there's a subset of them.
Yeah, there's definitely. And then you ask yourself, how can they be so rare, but there's 7 or 8 species? And then we're not even talking about the dogman yet, where some are 8 feet tall, some don't have a tail, some do have a tail, some have a mane, some don't have a mane. It's like how many subspecies of Bigfoot is? Probably 7 to 10, I would guess. That would be a guess. But I think the more important thing, other than subspecies, is what is their behavior like? What is their thoughts about humanity? How do they act? Are some of them nice? I've talked to people that this thing looked at it and like it wanted to murder them, but it didn't. Something was stopping it. It was me. I'll say I'm the witness. And it was it. There was nothing in between us. He wasn't even armed. And this thing was looking at him with murderous red eyes, putting the fear of God in him, but it never took a step. It let him go. It happens over and over and over again. And it's almost as if there's a rule, though some of them break that rule. There's a rule that they're not supposed to hurt us. And it took me a long time to hear the same pattern over and over before I realized, Jesus, they're all saying the same thing. Like this thing wanted to. There's no way. I mean, sometimes I look at you with pity. I've talked to guys where it saved their life, pulled them drowning out of a creek, reached in, snatched them out, threw them up, and looked on and smelled him and just stood up and walked away. And there are the other stories of these saving people's lives. So they don't all hate us, obviously. Some of them feel sorry for us. Some of them just like want nothing to do with us. But there's a subset of these things that really don't like us. And maybe it's for good reason. I don't know. It seems like there is an unspoken rule. When I say that, what I'm really telling you, there's another party involved here. There's them, there's us, and there's the rule maker, the one that's in the shadows that has told these things. Don't mess with the humans. Just leave them alone. If you see them, walk away. And they'll do that, but sometimes they look at you, they want to murder you. They give you the murderous look before they turn to walk away. But something stops them. There's some kind of a rule that they're not allowed to break. And that means, in my opinion, there's another party involved here.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's almost like the uglier the Bigfoot, the more mean they are, right?
Yep.
Something about it. There's some of those ones that just look like they just rolled out of like some bad Woodstock festival, and they're covered in dreadlocks and they smell like garbage, and they're ready to eat you. And then there's some that look like like you're like a friend. We've heard people say this one woman said she was canoeing and she said she saw one that was beautiful. She said she wanted to park her canoe.
That was one of my favorite ones. It was like a beautiful Brad Pitt Bigfoot just they're sunning on the beach.
Just waiting for her.
I talked to a fisherman in South Carolina who found this spot he'd always wanted to go to. He had to hike through the woods to get there, and there was nobody around. So he got there early in the morning, but he didn't smell anything. And he gets down to the creek and he's fly fishing, and he hears somebody coming. He's thinking, "Oh man, somebody found my spot. I thought this was really going to be like no one's going to know the spot was here." And he can hear walking behind, which assumes it's another fisherman. And it stops, and he finally just turns around behind him, and behind him, up on the hill a little bit, he said there was this Bigfoot, and it was actually had stopped. And the sun was hitting it, and it was early in the morning. And he said, I could see the steam coming off the hair on this thing. It was almost like it had its eyes closed, and it was letting the sun, he was feeling it come out of the woods and it come into the sun where the sun could hit it. And it stood there, and it kind of like put its arms out like that, and it let the sun hit it. And this thing was acting like, oh, it felt so good, but it didn't know this guy was this fisherman. He was down there. He says, I'm looking at this thing, and he said the hair looked like it was clean. It was like bathed. And it was, he said, Dave, he must have said it 3 or 4 times. It was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. And I don't remember him telling me actually if it was a male or a female. I don't think it mattered at the moment. And he said, I was absolutely taken with this thing. And he said, I actually had set my pole down, and this thing still did not know I was there. And he said, it took a couple steps towards it. It was far enough away where I wasn't really advancing. I was so close, but I took a couple steps at it, and I made a noise. I hit a branch or a crack or something, and it stopped and looked at me. And he said, I put my hands up and I went, hey, take it easy. Take it easy. And he says, and it's kind of got a panicked look. And he said, this thing backed up against it, took a couple steps behind it to a tree. And he says, this is exact words. He said, it backed up against the tree and tried to blend in with the tree. I had to go. Now, this is a thing 7 foot, trees round. Usually trees are dark. These things are reddish brown. I'm not really sure. And at the time, because one of my first reports, he said it tried to blend in with the tree. And when he realized it wasn't working, he said it turned and it tore up off this hill. He said it was like a turbocharged bulldozer. This thing just, you could hear trees crack as this thing ran up. And he said it got to the top and then it let out a roar. And then he could hear it run it off. And he said, you think I would be so scared that I would have left? He says, I actually stayed there, and I was thinking about camping overnight there to see if it would come back. So I wanted to see it again because it didn't act aggressively or anything towards him. Point being, I just remember this guy saying, he must have said it 3 or 4 times. It was the most beautiful thing. And as a matter of fact, as he was approaching, I think he even said something like you're really beautiful, something like that. But yeah, just reminded me when you said
Sounds like a made for TV romance movie.
Yeah, maybe.
He out in the woods, he saw something beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah, that's funny. No, but it's fascinating. Like the variety of experiences people have with this creature, I think is you're right. Like you hold a Gigantopithecus, this idea that there's this elusive ape, and when you're saying that, I thought, this is to me is really analogous to the UFO phenomena as well. And we're not going to go down that rabbit hole necessarily, but the idea that it's very rare, but then people have been collecting this for 20, 30, 40 years. Ufologists have been chronicling in the same way the BFRO and your colleagues and their colleagues and investigators have been doing the same thing with Bigfoot. This is happening at the same time. If you don't read the book, you don't know. You just say, "Oh man, that's kind of wacky." Only the rednecks see the UFOs, and it kind of happens the same thing with Bigfoot, right? Only these, all these rednecks are out there seeing Bigfoot, but then you realize that we've talked to tons of folks on the show. We had a top clearance Air Force officer who was on base in the 70s and had a Bigfoot walk across the runway on a secure base that you can't get on, right? And so you start thinking about, when you said the neighborhoods, Nate had a childhood experience with a dog man in suburbia, in his backyard and looking in the window. These things start to break the paradigm, right? You go, there's too much weird going on here, and it's too many people and too many places that an elusive primate wouldn't be,
right, for
this to be. What I think is fascinating is the flesh and blood element too, right? You do have footprints. Yeah. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who was we had on the show very early on, is one of the biggest proponents of this elusive giant ape, remnant ape, relic ape. I like that you said relic. I love that term. It's a relic hominid, right? And he's got a butt prints and he's got thousands of footprints, and yet you got to know why can't you? Where's the body? Where's the smoking gun? Why like you said, why are people having? About Skinwalker Ranch, why are people having experiences with orbs? We got 4. I don't know how many more episodes down the road, Nate, and we talked to Ron Moorhead about Sierra Sounds, and you go, man, there's like orbs and lights and all kinds of weird things going on there, and you go, there's something way, way weird that surrounds this creature. I wanted to ask you though, there does seem to be benevolent Bigfoot, right? We have stories of David Paulides missing 411 of kids spending 20 hours in freezing weather in shorts and a t-shirt with a big bear that took care of them, right? Or drowning children, or people being saved. Then you also have these things ripping trailers apart and destroying. Perhaps, as we talked to early on, Nate, it was Tom Sewitt about Bigfoot killing people and stuff, right? You have this sort of spectrum of weirdness.
Yeah, it's all over the map.
Like, who do you think, when you talked about that and sort of mentioned that, who or what do you think is essentially calling the shots when it comes to, I don't know, reining in the behavior of the big guy?
That's a good question, because that's who we should be really looking for. We go with the UFOs, and we go with the Bigfoot, and we go with the dogmen. But that's actually, when I give a presentation, the point I'm trying to make is, we're never going to catch one of these things. It's not going to happen.
Right.
If you found a body, which I'm sure people have, you better shut up, because if you think the powers to be are going to let you drag this thing, blow the lid off this thing, you'd be lucky if they don't come to your house and plant drugs or something worse in your house and go, hey, we're going to have to arrest you if you don't shut up.
Correct.
But I think there's definitely a third party, and I don't know who that third party is. I've got suspicions who the third party is. And I think they do a lot of directing here, and I think they've been here for a long time. I think they've been coexisting with us and helping us along. But I don't think there's just one entity. I think there's several, and I think several of those entities are argue. I want to say argue. I think they conflict with each other every once in a while about the direction humanity's supposed to go. I know it's deep, but I think that these Bigfoots and dogmen are really a symptom of a much bigger program. They're just one little aspect of a much bigger program. And that's what they're trying to keep us from learning. I don't know what it is. And sometimes I'm a regular guy. Right. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a regular guy. I've been doing this for a long time. But I have a wife and kids and grandkids that I enjoy. And my brain will let me take in so much. And I go, man, I think I'll just go pick up the grandkids and take them for ice cream tonight.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because 100%. Yeah, because you can go down some dark roads.
Yeah, and I don't want to I've met enough guys whose life have really been, they get so deep in this, they lose everything. They lose their marriage, they lose their job. And because there's a lot of guys and gals out there like that. And when you realize this thing might be just too big for one person.
But yeah, that's interesting because it's not what you're talking, that paradigm you're talking about is fascinating because when you're trying to solve enigmas, right? You're trying to solve these puzzles, it can become obsessive, and people get in this space where all they can think about and do and operate is try to solve this puzzle. And the reality, I think what you're saying is interesting because, you know, a lot of what we talk about on the show it sort of falls in line with that there are these powers behind the scenes that are in conflict with each other often, and they have dominion over places on Earth, and they have control, and perhaps there's a connection. And then I think what's interesting is what we say on the show is the interdimensionality of this creature. Because there's enough, like we talked to John Redbird Dover on the Navajo, who was a 30-year ranger on the Navajo reservation. You talk about, it's even the Himalayan tracks, right? You have these tracks that just disappear into nowhere, and that doesn't really make any sense. So that shouldn't happen. Not if you have a flesh and blood animal that's walking. It doesn't stop making tracks in the snow. It doesn't stop making tracks in the mud, but it stops, right? They're not just anecdotal in the sense of like they're singular. There's a lot of stories like this, and you can cast all the tracks. This is not someone just taking off the Bigfoot print, you know, hoax shoes, and it isn't that at all. What a crazy, funny, bizarre world we can get into when we start talking about these things that are, you know, don't make sense in a lot of ways, right? As you try to unwrap these. So I think you made a good point. There's a perspective to this, right? You got to make sure that you don't. In some ways, you can get sucked into the black hole. And it doesn't spit you out very often.
Like, just like human beings can be loyal to dark forces and some human beings can be loyal to God, then there are neutral human beings that seem to go about their lives and ignore it all. I mean, do you think the Bigfoot creature could fall into these categories as well? Some of them are just neutral. They sort of rogue.
Just eating chickens, just stealing sheep and chickens.
Who knows? They're not loyal to anything.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there are some rogue ones. And there's way more than a few thousand of these things. It's funny you should mention physical evidence like footprints, because these things exist in places like New Zealand and Japan where they should not be there. New Zealand hasn't been connected to a landmass for millions of years. You tell me how these things have been there for millions of years on the island of New Zealand, which basically formed from a volcanic eruption. That's what really made the island as big as it is. It's a series of, I think, 3 islands. Get the North Island, South Island. There's a couple outlying islands. How can there be a Bigfoot there? It's really impossible. If they're there, it's like a monkey.
Maybe they sail. Maybe there's a Bigfoot armada, and they just took a little boat out there. You know.
Well, let's face it. Everybody that is in New Zealand arrived there by ship.
They did.
And that's probably how they got there. But that doesn't necessarily mean they came there on a ship on the ocean.
A sailing ship. Yes, correct. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we talk about that all the time. There's megalithic structures all over the world. There's evidence of giants all over the world, and so they were travelers. Bigfoot just hitched a ride on the back of the boat, probably
snuck in there. 7-footer.
He could just tap on the old mast and
he just blended in the mast.
Yeah,
just like, you don't see me here. I'm just here I am.
Well, David,
you know, I've had this fascination with the Yeren, the Chinese Bigfoot. And Dr. Emilio Estevez. Emilio Estesargin.
From Young Guns?
He's the...
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Mighty
He's
Ducks?
the primatologist at the Smithsonian Institute of Natural History. Yeah. You've seen him on. He's been on a couple shows with Dr. Meldrum.
Yeah.
Super nice guy. Well, his nephew came to the museum about 2 years ago and said, "Hey, you told me who his uncle was." And I was like, I'm sorry, the name is... I can't remember exactly how to say his name. Nice guy. Well, he comes to the museum about 2 months later. I just happened to be at the museum because I'm not there every day. And I got a chance to meet this primatologist, world famous guy that's been on, I don't know, half a dozen important Bigfoot documentaries. And he said, you know, when the Chinese came, when Nixon opened up, I was there. When Nixon opened up the trade doors with China, the Chinese scientists came to the Smithsonian, the Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., and we were shown a few things around, and we got to the primate, and they seemed kind of anxious to ask us something, but they had to use interpreters. So we got to the room where all the primates were, and they said, he was talking about, he said, excuse me, the Chinese. He wants to ask you a question. And the first question these guys wanted to know these are nice skeletons you have here, but tell us about your what you call Bigfoot, because we have the Yeren in China. Can we see those skeletons? That's the first thing they wanted to see, was our Yerens, aka Bigfoot.
Smithsonian was like, no dice, not happening.
That'd tell them, yeah, well, we know what you're talking
Sure.
about. You don't have it because we have them in China. We just assume because you're Americans, you get all this money and this amazing museums, which they didn't have in China at the time. This was in the late 70s, I guess, early 70s. Yeah, we don't have it. And they were like so disappointed. But that was the first thing the Chinese want to see, because the Chinese don't have their skeletons. The Australians don't have the skeletons from the Yowie. The Africans don't have the skeletons from their giant hominid that's reported to be in Africa. They don't have the skeletons in Japan. They don't have the skeleton. Do you understand? Do you get my drift right here? How can they be everywhere? Millions of years of history. It's one thing that we don't have a skeleton for the one 6 million years ago. And it's one thing we don't have the skeleton one that just died yesterday. But where's all the skeletons in between, Jack? Where's all those generations of boys and girls and those branched off? Where's the 7 footers and 8 footers? Where are all that mountain of skeletons on every continent that they're there now? And if they're there now, that means they were there before. Where is that whole lineage? They don't have them. So if that isn't unusual,
Dave, where are they?
It is. Yeah.
They go somewhere to die. They just knock on that tree and they just leave.
You got them in your museum. That's where they are. They're in the museum.
Yeah. Well, no doubt a few of them exist. A few of those remains do exist. Just because we don't get to see them doesn't mean somebody doesn't have them and they're squirreled away somewhere. That's probably where some of them are, but they're not going to hide 1 million of them or 1,000 of them. They might have
so strange
or 50, but we'll never see
so strange. Yeah,
I guess those monks in Tibet, or I think it's Tibet, have the skull of one.
They got the Bigfoot toupee. Yeah, they put on his hair every once in a while and do some stuff with it. Yeah.
Well, David, I think our listeners are probably itching to hear you say, like, you've heard all these stories all these years, and I've been kind of in the Bigfoot space for the last 10 years, 12 years of and then 3 years into this podcast. There's always those 1 or 2 stories that just rattle you. You've heard everything, but then there's someone comes in and tells you something, and you're like, I have never considered or heard or even pondered this. What are some of the maybe 2 or 3 that just left you kind of scratching your head and you had to take a break and close the shop for the day and just wander? And
yeah, I have a couple of those stories. I'll tell you my second to the strangest story. And that happened actually right here in LJ. I've had so many when I moved up here, there was only one incident in the Bureau database up here. Once I moved up here, I was like, yeah, it's a nice place to live in the mountains, but there's no Bigfoots. And as soon as I built the museum, I put the sign up front, the locals started coming in, and I realized, oh my God, there's all these stories that are unreported, where there's a mountain of them up here. And some days I'm there to hear them, and sometimes I'm not. But I was actually having a conversation in the lobby with another researcher. And this couple came in, went through the museum, came back out. And on their way out, they said, they heard us talking. They said, hey, if you want to hear some crazy Bigfoot story, you need to talk to my mom. And these guys were in their 60s, probably. And I thought, Mom, she must be in her 80s, right? And some of the older Bigfoot stories, I don't know why, they just seem to be the best. And I go, what happened? And this guy told me a story. It wasn't a long story. And I was looking at this other research. I'm like, this guy's pulling my leg right. And he was not pulling my leg. He says, before I was born, my mother and my dad lived in a little cabin over here in LJ. And this probably would have been 65 years ago. And before I was born, my older brother was a little baby. And he says, my mother and father were sleeping, and my older brother was in a crib in a separate bedroom. He says, that's before we had, I don't know if they had like latches or something on the windows, or they didn't have screens. So this would have been, I guess, in the 50s or the 60s, early 60s, I guess. Mm-hmm. And she says the mother slips into the baby's room, opens up the door, walks to the baby's room, to the shock of her life. He said one of these wood boogers, that's what they call them up here, had crawled into the window, into the baby's room. And it was a female, and she was trying to nurse the baby. She had the baby out of the crib. She was trying to breastfeed the baby. The mother screamed. The female Bigfoot dropped the baby into the crib. Thank God it was right into the crib, and then leapt out the window, was gone. And I heard that before from a Native American story, story. And we were looking at each other like, this guy's bullshitting, right? And he wasn't. I said, is your mother still alive? And he said, yeah. I said, can you ask her if she would come in so I can get the whole story from her? He said, yeah, her brains are all together, but she's not very strong. She walks with a walker. I'll do my best. He has not brought her in, but he told me her name. He gave me his name. So everything from the guy told me was completely legit. And I don't know why he would tell me his wife was with him, make up a story. Nobody was laughing. So that's one of the unusual stories, to hear a female trying to nurse a baby.
Yeah.
And the strangest story, and I still think about this story sometimes because it has frightening implications that actually start to connect some pieces, uncomfortable pieces. And you'll know why when I tell you. I had this guy come in maybe 3 years ago. I think he had gone through the museum, but he had come back. He was an older guy. I say older, he was probably in his 70s. I'm 60. At the time, I was about 58, I guess. He comes out, it's him, his wife, his son, his son's daughter, and then 3 grandkids. So he's got the whole family with him. And he's leaving. He says, can I talk to you for a second? I said, sure. And we're busy, man. So unfortunately, he caught me at a time where I was just me and my wife, and I'm doing the talk and talking to people. So I don't have a lot of time at this moment to talk to this guy. So he says, told me his name. He says, I used to live right here. I was raised right here in LJ, up on Talona Ridge. I know where that's at. There's a big RV park up there right now. He says, when I was about 16, I used to live on a farm. And my neighbor, kid next to me, I knew him from school, but I didn't know him real well. So I had a farm, and then my neighbor, which wasn't right next door, was just down the road a little bit, was this kid. I knew him from school. And then we all went to school together. So I think he was about 16, 17 at the time. So he said, one night I bought a van, like a custom van, but it was a van. And he says, we go up to the top of Talona Ridge. It's me, I'm driving, these 2 girls, these 2 sisters, and he told me their names. Now, as he's telling me this story, anytime somebody's telling me a story, I'm looking at him, but my peripheral vision, I'm looking at the wife, I'm looking at the kids, I'm looking who he's with to judge if they're elbowing, hey, he's getting ready to get the big one. But none of that was going on, which, believe it or not, doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Almost never. So this guy's telling me, and his kids, they're all like, they're like a front. Like, my grandpa's about to tell you a story. Say something stupid. That kind of front. So I noticed that was coming, that they were like standing there because Grandpa was finally getting ready to tell somebody his story. So he says, we get up to the top. He said, we had a little cooler of beer, but we hadn't even cracked the beers yet. So I'm in the driver's seat. One of the sisters is sitting in the seat next to me. My neighbor kid, I didn't know very well. I knew him. We didn't really hang out a lot, but he was with us, and he was behind me in the seat that runs parallel with the perpendicular to the wheelbase. And across from him was the other sister. And she was sitting on a little bench by the doors. And then I had another buddy. He was sitting all the way in the back. So it was 5 of us. And he said, we just parked. We weren't there that long. It wasn't dark. It was getting dark. So it was enough peripheral light they could see. They were talking inside in the van. And so he's talking to the girl in this chair next to him. And as he's talking, her eyes look to behind him. And all of a sudden, her eyes get huge. She's got this look of terror on her face. And he's looking at her thinking, what in the world? So he turns around and looks in the chair behind him. And where this kid that he didn't know very well was sitting, there was now this giant ape man sitting there. The whole van is in complete pandemonium. She's screaming. Her sister, who's sitting right across from this thing, she's screaming. The guy in the back, trying to open up the doors to get out. Complete pandemonium. And when he turns on or looks at this thing is doing this. It's looking, it's not just sitting there, it's got a panic look on its face, like either like it's they see me or uh-oh, something's wrong. I did something wrong. So this big thing's got this panic look on his face. He says, I'm not even thinking where this thing came from. He says, I'm bailing out of the car. I reached for my door handle to bail out of my van. And he said, my hand accidentally hit the interior lights. Now all the lights come out of the van and the thing is gone. And there's the neighbor kid back in the place where this thing is now. And it's doing this, the same thing. It's looking around. The kid's now looking around like, what's the matter? What did you see? And he said, we got everybody settled down. We left. I dropped the girls off, dropped the kid off, dropped my neighbor off. I don't remember what and unfortunately, I did not ask him because there were so many people around. My brain was just trying to take this in. I didn't ask him if this thing was wearing clothes. I have taken reports of Bigfoot's wearing clothes. So unfortunately, I didn't get to ask this guy if it was wearing the kid's clothes, if it was just all hairy, just nothing but hair. He said, I went home. The next day, these two girls, these two sisters, they didn't show up to school. He says, I finally caught up with the two sisters a month later, and their mother, they couldn't sleep. They were terrified. Their mother had to take the two sisters to a psychologist down in Atlanta to get some help so these girls could handle what they saw. My neighbor kid, within 60 days, the family packed their crap and they were gone. They left.
Wow.
So he left me with that story, and there's people waiting behind me to talk to me, and my brain just going.
You're like, what is happening?
Now, and since then,
Yeah.
I've talked to other people. I talked to people who have seen these things wearing clothes. Bigfoot's either wearing tattered clothes, older clothes. Bert Nunnally's mother saw a dog man staring at her through the window wearing an old white blouse. When you hear that stuff, then I've talked to people that have seen, witnesses that have seen animals turn into people turn into animals. And when you start hearing this stuff, of course, if you hear the first one, you're like, oh, okay. And the third one, and that guy told me that story. Wife and family was standing next to him. And he said, I don't care what you do with this. I don't care if you believe me. He said, I'm getting old and I'm not going to be around much longer. And I had to get it off my chest. And he told me the girls' names and everything.
Wow.
Like he didn't leave out names and dates. Of course, at the time, I wasn't writing anything down. I was just trying to remember this whole story. And that story stuck with me for a long time. I laid my head down at night thinking, oh man, right? And we all hear about shapeshifters and I didn't used to give that a lot of weight, but now I don't dismiss those thoughts like I used to about shapeshifters.
You know, we interviewed two ladies who had gone through satanic ritual abuse, which is it's not the most fun thing to talk about on our show, but it's heavy. It's heavy stuff. These kids get groomed. They go to these seances in the middle of nowhere. It's the stuff that, you hear about. You grow up in the church. Either your church is completely asleep to this, or there are people actively trying to educate you on how dark the world can be and what goes on with all these. But she said in that interview that they were taken into this cave, and she said this person transformed into like a Bigfoot creature and was going to eat somebody else in this cave. And I remember at the time going, I don't think I've heard a lot of those stories, but that was her story. And that was like something that they said on the podcast that, inside some of these caves or some of these things and they can transform. And we've heard some really wacky stuff on our show that maybe a couple years ago I would have been like, dude, I don't know. I think that person's just telling you, making something up. But the amount of stuff we've heard, it just defies the laws of everything that we kind of understand how this all works. Mm-hmm. And I saw a dog man in the window of my parents' house as a kid. It was like just this werewolf face, and the way I remember I saw it was because I would run from one corner of the house to the other corner of the house for years. I wouldn't look out that door into the backyard. And we were in a suburb of Sacramento, and then we got a Facebook message, and a girl grew up like down the street, and she saw the same thing by a light pole out of her front window. And we're near the American River, so there could be some trail for this thing to move and go. But my question is are these things arriving on UFOs? Are they coming and going? Because there's a lot of stories of Bigfoot, UFOs, islands. How do they get around the world? Some people say they've seen them get in and out. You know, what's the connection to these cryptid creatures and a mechanism of traveling like a UFO? We don't have to talk aliens. We can just talk. Are they moving in these things? Is there some connection there that you've heard a lot more of?
Stan Gordon seems to think so. Are you familiar with Stan Gordon?
A little bit, not a lot.
Yeah. So he was just strictly a UFO guy, and until the 70s when he started getting reports of UFOs in the same place as Bigfoots were, and then it got into the state police were seeing them, and the state police were calling them. They were confirming that the Bigfoots and the UFOs are being seen in the same place. Sometimes people will see the UFO land, and out will come two Bigfoot. Now these things did not appear to be in control of the craft. They didn't seem to be super intelligent. They were almost like some kind of primitive foot creature, which is, I really think, in all, what these things really are. They're just a gopher for somebody else.
The grunts.
Yeah. And so I think when people, and he's got, I don't know how many stories of Bigfoots associated with craft. Remember, there was one story I heard that had a profound effect on me. Well, it wasn't something I read in a UFO book. I'm trying to remember if it was Timothy Good was his book, or if it was one of Stan Gordon's books. I can't remember, but it was a guy who saw, I think he was hunting or he was in the woods at some point. I had been camping and saw a bright light, approached the bright light. It was a UFO that had landed with a bright hole, and he walked up to, didn't see anybody around. And he walked up to, he was going to put his hand on the shield, and this thought came into his head: do not touch the craft. Step back from the craft. So he stepped back, and then he heard these words. He said, watch. And out from the woods comes a Bigfoot walking, comes right up to the craft, and as if by some force that it didn't have any defense against, it put its hand on the craft, and poof, this thing just like dissolved. Like whatever it was, it killed the Bigfoot. And he sat there watching the whole thing happen, and they said, see, don't touch the craft. And that had an effect on me because they treated that like it was just a disposable foot soldier. It wasn't important. It was just a biological thing that they used for something, and it was disposable. It was expendable, very expendable, obviously, if they were just making a point. Of course, I can't say that story was true, but it was in a book I was reading, and it was by an author that I trusted. And it kind of goes along with all the other things where these things probably do travel back. And I know they travel somewhere. But I don't think they're the apex that we're thinking they are.
Well, I mean, the reason I ask you, Dave, is because all these years listening to Bigfoot encounters and even just listening to some of your experiences, it's almost as if they're as confused as we are sometimes, because it's like they don't. It's not like they've been there watching us for a long time. It's like, where am I? What am I doing? There's this confused, like they just got dropped off somewhere and they don't know where they are. It's like someone drops you off in backwoods France and you're this American kid. You don't even know what the language is. You don't know where you are. You don't know how to eat. That's how there's so many of those stories. It seems like they don't know where they are. They don't even know what's going on.
That is a great observation, and you're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, that thought has crossed my mind several times when I've heard reports of these things standing next to the road. I interviewed a Georgia biologist who saw one in Middle Georgia, and remember her. She was coming up to it was on the road she was driving. She thought it was just a guy standing there with a fur coat, and she's thinking it's summer. Why would a guy? She gets closer and closer. This Georgia biologist realizes what she's looking at. She says, David, I just drove right next to it. It was right outside my window. I was like, oh, so I was, what did it look like? And she goes, I don't know. And I go, what do you mean you don't know? She goes, that was all I could do to hold my car on the road. I looked straight ahead. She said, I was so scared I didn't want to look at it. But I've heard these stories where they're standing on the side of the road. They step in front of a car like they didn't know what a car was. And other stories where they're frightened. I'm sure you've all heard the story of a Bigfoot running around the highway somewhere in Texas. And it was trying to dodge the cars. It was like almost like it had just been dropped off there, didn't know the program. And a lot of stories I hear is the same thing. They act like they don't know the program. Like they're a fresh arrival, haven't learned how it works yet. So yeah, that observation has occurred to me as well.
Yeah, they show up in a van, and then it's like Harry and the Hendersons, except everybody goes to therapy, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's wild, and also like Nate, you talk about the UFO phenomena, but there's also, as we kind of talked about earlier, there's so many odd stories about whether it be called portal opening up or them sort of just dematerializing or stepping into, you talked about trees opening up, it sounds like Lord of the Rings or something, but you have these really wild stories of these things just disappearing, as people try to shoot them with firearms and they're just gone, or they
talk to all those guys. They shot him at point blank.
Yeah.
He doesn't fall down, doesn't flinch.
Well, it sounded like that one that backed up to the tree. It was almost like it was trying to put on its camouflage and it wasn't working.
Like Predator. The Predator button was jammed.
He didn't say, he said the tree wasn't big enough. So whatever it was doing, it couldn't shrink itself. So that's the point. He said it wasn't working because it was much bigger than the tree.
The last guy we interviewed about Bigfoot, he was in a cabin at night and they were out on a hike, and he said he was laying in his cabin at night and Bigfoot comes up to the cabin and takes over his brain, gives him the vision from the Bigfoot's point of view, watching him earlier in the day and his family. And I've heard mind speak and I've heard visions, but this guy basically said the Bigfoot gave him a vision of seeing him walking with his family down the trail. And then he could kind of hear it communicating with him. Do you get those stories a lot where they're speaking, communicating? It's probably so outside of the box. Some people probably feel it's too traumatic probably.
So probably the third story the third witness I got to interview when I was a BFRO. But by the way, I was a Florida BFRO investigator and I quit because they wouldn't print what the people were telling me. Oh, we can't print that.
Wow.
Why? Well, that just doesn't fit the box. I'm like, I'm not in a box. I'm here to investigate, and I tell you what, and if the people get to disseminate the information and think for themselves. That is not what's happening.
It's hard to control the narrative when you do that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's real tough, yeah. When you let everybody say the truth, it's hard to control that. Yeah.
Is that some kind of like CIA thing? Or is that just like they don't want to?
They're afraid. They're just afraid people won't take them seriously.
Okay.
It's more of a pride thing, I think.
Okay.
No, they won't take us seriously already. We're going to tell them about UFOs and changing the dog, man. They won't. I'm like, I don't understand. If you're here to tell the truth, and that's where I'm here. I'm here to tell the truth. I don't give two shits what people think about me, because when I'm older and I'm facing the big guy in the sky, I didn't hold nothing back. So, but the third guy I interviewed, but when it comes to mind speak, talk about they just punched me right in the mouth. I think this was the first time that they wouldn't publish it. They maybe take it out. He was a young kid and he was just outside Ocala, I think. And he had to take the garbage out. I'll make the story short because it's what happened. That was the most important part. It was like real early in the morning, 7:15. The sun just come up. He had to go to school, and his mom says, "Take the garbage out." So he had to get the garbage, walk back along the side of the house, take it to the big can in the back of the house. Comes around the corner, and there's a bear bent over eating garbage out of the garbage can. And he says, "I stop, I freeze. I'm looking at this thing. I'm thinking, that's a big bear, man." All of a sudden, this bear becomes aware of the kid standing behind him. He said, "The weird thing is, I didn't make any noise. I just look at it. All of a sudden, it knew I was there." He says, "It stands up now. It's not bent over." I'm like, this thing is big. And it turns and looks at me. He says, I look at it right in the eyes. I lock eyes with it. Then there's a pause, and he goes, and then I went back in the house. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Because I've heard the stories like you lock eyes with this thing. Sometimes people hear or see things or get a feeling. It relates, like maybe it's emotions. I said, what happened when you locked eyes with it? That's what I want to know. He says, yeah, I don't feel comfortable talking about that. I said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you just sit man to man? Sometimes it's easier to say it in email than to talk about it. So why don't you just tell me what happened to email? He said, okay, I'll do that. So next morning, there's an email, and I'm just a new investigator, kind of a newbie, to open it up. And that paragraph, what he sent me, changed my trajectory. He said, David, when I looked at this thing, he's only 12 years old. He says, I'm not into science fiction. I'm just a normal kid going to school. I guess this would have been back in the late 70s. He says, this thing looked in my eyes and this thought jammed into my head. It wasn't my thought, right into my head. 2 sentences. It said, you, man, are not of this world, planet. He put the parentheses, you, and then he put man, are not of this world, in parentheses, planet.
Wow.
And that's what jammed into his head. And then it just turned around and walked off. And he said, when it wasn't looking at me, I was unfrozen. I ran back in the house. And I called him back up. I said, you don't want to tell me this. I didn't want to tell you that, but I'm telling you that's exactly what happened. And he said, it changed my life because I didn't come from a really book smart family. He says, after that happened, I consumed theology books. I consumed philosophy. He sent me books, all these very interesting books that I wasn't into theology. But he says, I'm like the only one in my family that's like this. It all started from that moment when that thing jammed that thought into my head. You, man, are not of this world planet. And anyways, I put that on my report. And of course, they weren't interested in that. And then somebody hit a young dog man, and they didn't want to put that out there. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm not here. It's not what I'm here for.
That is wow. That's fascinating. What do you think the dog man is? Because it seems to be a little bit harder to nail down than like the Bigfoot experiences.
Except when he's wearing the Seinfeld puffy shirt, and then you go,
yeah,
who that is.
Yeah, I know. The earlier story reminded me of Teen Wolf. Just a bunch of guys in a van. All of a sudden, someone gets all hairy.
That dog man. That's the antithesis. That's the enemy of standard mainstream Bigfooter. They don't want to talk about it. I can name a half a dozen guys I know that won't talk about it. Not in their lectures. It's not in their books. I'm like, how can it not be? They're practically brothers, if not cousins. 7 feet tall, run like the wind. Both are reported to have glowing eyes. How can two extremely similar creatures share the same impossible human attribute of glowing eyes, and they're not related?
Right.
So any Bigfooter that doesn't take dog man into account, I don't have anything to do with, because he's just rehashing the same old garbage. What is dog man? Man, I honestly, I don't know. I know there a lot of good people see him, and not only do good people. Are you familiar with the Martin Grove story?
Yeah.
Geez, that guy, huh?
Land between the lakes out here, right?
Yeah. What a punch in the mouth that was for that guy to not only see this, him and his buddy wasn't alone, then realize the next morning he had killed a guy he just met, a hunter, and then his own law enforcement comrades basically were going to get him fired if he didn't shut up and stop talking about it. And how'd you like that? I mean, I saw 2 Bigfoot standing behind a tree. It was interesting, but I wasn't threatened, and nobody was threatened to fire me from my job. So guys like Martin Groves, they go through some serious personal hell. He's got to live with that story for 18 or 20 years or something. And to think that I'm sure he ain't the only one that saw one in the military or with the Forest Service or police officer. They told him to shut up if you like your job. And then they're selling hunting passes to go to the same park where these things are at. Yeah. It's almost like they're ringing the dinner bell. Ding, ding, ding. Come on, we can sell you passes to the campground. So when we ask why don't they tell us about it? Because, of course, if they told us the truth about these creatures, it'd be complete pandemonium. It'd be absolute panic. And I'm sure over the past few years, you've seen a little panic in your lives. You know what I'm talking about? Some people, they take fear to a whole nother level. They don't even think about reality. If somebody called me, they have called me, hey, I got one of these on my property. I shot it when I was deer hunting. And I found the area where it was squirming around, but it wasn't there. If it comes back, I'm going to shoot it. Will you help me mark the body? I said, hell no. I said, if you kill one of these things, don't even call me. I don't want to be on your call list. Right. I said, if you think you're going to be famous, you're not. You may be famous because they're going to find the biggest haul of cocaine in your house, and you're going to take you off to jail if you don't do what they tell you to do. So I let people know, if you have a body, don't call me. I like my life. I'll share these things with other interested parties, but the general public, everybody, you better be careful where you step.
That's how you end up like the Clintons and the Obama chefs. What an accident there. Yeah. I want to ask you about the dog man, because I think when you talk about connecting the two and how important that is, right. You run a Bigfoot Museum. How often do you have people come in and talk about other cryptids, especially how or how often particularly do you have dogman stories? Because I think you're right, it's a fascinating story. We've talked to a few folks.
I've got 4 I've got to follow up on right now, just over the past month.
Drop some of these on us, because I think this is the weirdest paradigm, right? Because you have this sort of huge werewolf type creature.
So
yeah.
I was, and I run into these people. They don't come to me. Sometimes because I wear my shirt, or I've got my
You're
truck
a beacon,
with the museum
Dave.
logo.
You're a beacon. Yeah.
So I'll just go pick up a couple bales of hay, and the guy will come out. Oh, do you work over at Bigfoot Museum? Yeah. Hey, can I tell you a story? I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. And I went to go pick up some hay, some straw from the co-op. And the kid that's loading up tells me he's hunting over here in Morganton with his dad on their own property. He says, I'm hunting. My dad is flushing deer towards me, and I can hear something come through the woods. And it's like, that ain't a deer. That sounds like a bear sound. Really busted a lot of trees down. He said, it busts out in front of me. He says, what I'm looking at doesn't even belong on this planet. He said, it looked like it was he said, it was about as tall as me, standing up. He's like about 5'6", so it wasn't huge. And he was running on four. He made a sketch for me. He said, even though it was running on four legs, it looked like its legs were long enough where it could easily stand up. He said, when it was running, it was more like bounding, like it could walk on two legs. But to get speed and really run in the woods, you had to drop down on all fours. He said it had this long, bushy tail. He said that was one of the things I remember about this thing. It's this big, powerful, bushy tail it had. So it was like, and he said the coloration, even though it had like a wolf face, he said more like a baboon face. But he said the coloration was like a raccoon. It didn't look like a raccoon, just the colors, the fur, and the mane coming off it had the colors of a raccoon. There was a cryptid. I don't know what that is. Yeah. And then, oh my God, there's another Dogman report. I just finished talking to a guy, 20-year Air Force. And then he went to the National Guard, retired with the National Guard. And he was hunting over near Savannah, Georgia. And he's walking along the road. He's looking at his GPS and he's deer hunting. Did he have a rifle? Or a bow? He had a bow. He's walking with his bow. And he looks at his app, and he stops to look at his hunting app because he can see where the marina, where the lakes, the ponds are at. So even though he's on a walk, and it's not a road, it's just a bush hog trail wide enough for a truck to drive on. He says, I'm walking. And he said, I just looked at my phone. This is important. I put my phone away. I took a step. And he said, usually when I put my phone away, I always take a glance behind me. He said, I look behind me. He said, right behind me off the trail, standing on the edge of the trail, is something that's as tall as me. I said, how close is it? He said, he's ex-military. He said, 3 paces. 3 paces, a pace is about 30 inches for a man. That means 90 inches, so about 8 feet away. 8 feet away is all this thing is. He said, it's as tall as me. It's got the head of like a German shepherd, but it's narrower. And he said, it's got shoulders, I can see, but it's not standing on it. It's not like it's a dog it's not standing on anything. It's standing up. I said, I couldn't see it from the knees down because the grass was too high. He says, I absolutely just froze. And he says, this thing did not look at me like it wanted to kill me. He said that I stared at it, and he said, it looked like it was just interested in me. Like I didn't get the impression that it wanted to hurt me. And the next thing I said, I turned around, I started walking back to my truck. He says, but my heart, I can hear my heartbeat in my ears. I'm so scared. And the reason I told you about this important, he just put his phone away. As he's walking back the dirt on the walk, he can hear every step, and he can hear this thing pacing him about 10 feet behind him, real soft in the woods, following him in the grass. He thought, I think this thing's going to kill me. I just know it. And there's nothing I can do about it. So he gets about within 50 feet of the asphalt road where his truck is parked, and he can't hear it anymore. He says, it took all the military bearing I had to keep it together, because he said my heart was, and this just happened this past January, and he's 71 years old. He said, my heart, I think I'm going to have a heart attack. So got struck. I think he told his wife about it, and but he said it wasn't huge. It was as tall as me, and that just happened in January in Savannah. And super nice guy. And I've got 2 more dogman reports I have yet to follow up on. I still have to call the people. So you asked me how many I get. Dude, I have stacks of these things. I've got stacks of people. I try to get to the more important ones. I can't call the people that think they heard something or heard a distant howl. Yeah. I can't talk to all those people. But anybody that's had an eyeball sighting anywhere, I don't care what state it is, I'll usually try to call back to them. Dude, there's lots.
Man, I mean, I wonder how many of those Dogman stories, they don't live to tell the tale. You know, that's probably
David Pilates' work is extreme. I'm sure you know David Pilates' work. Yeah, he doesn't talk about Dogman or anything like that, to the best of my knowledge, but I'm sure his work parlays into these cryptids as well.
Yeah, some of these stuff.
Giants.
Like, I mean,
giants.
Can you talk about, like, do you get any like weirder ones, like Mothman stories, or any of the more bizarre, like giants? Because it seems like giants that are still around are wearing something. They're more on the human side of things. And then the Mothman ones, we've interviewed people who've had some historical accounts, and those two are still out there, but more rare.
Yeah. So, what's her name? Is it Judy? There's that amazing Mothman witness from the 60s. Sibylla used to work with us at the museum, so we got Sibylla and this Mothman witness, and I can't remember her name was. I have a hard time remembering.
That's fine. You meet people every day.
Her name was Faye Duport, I think. Faye Duport. Nice lady. Yeah, she saw it. She told me the whole story. She's been on TV and told her story. Jumped on the hood of her car. Her brother topped her. Still thought it was a guy in a costume. So she said when they got to where it was at, it was on top of a building. I'm trying to think, because she watched it forever. Did not realize it had wings until. He threw a rock or something at it. All of a sudden, the wings opened up, and she said the most beautiful set of wings. And this wings had feathers.
Interesting.
They weren't like bat wings; they were like feathers.
Yeah.
And unlike a lot of artist depictions, this thing had wings and arms. You realize that's impossible, right? No vertebra on the planet has wings and arms. You have one or the other than insects, of course, but no bats. Birds, you have wings or arms. So whatever this thing is, it's not from around here, obviously.
Yeah.
So I talked to her, and when it comes to giants, I'm sure you've heard the story of the giant of Kandahar.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring these up because I'm working in a new museum, and this new museum is going to have exhibits solely dedicated to the Kandahar giant, solely dedicated to Dogman, solely dedicated to Mothman. So I've got people working on big things right now. This new museum work on is going to tackle that stuff. I want people to just stop separating it. So Bigfoot's going to be there, Mothman, Dogman, the giant of Kandahar is going to be there. So I met this guy through Facebook. I think he made a comment on no, he didn't. Somebody's forwarded me his message. So I finally actually called him on the phone. And his brother, he went to, this guy, Rob, went to a wedding. His brother came, and his brother was retired military. I'm pretty sure Rob is military as well. His brother brought a military friend with him. And somewhere along the conversation, I think Rob was interested in this Kandahar giant, or his brother knew he was interested. And Rob's a just dogged investigator. And this guy was there. He was one of the guys that was there that lived through the Kandahar giant attack. And I was like, I was kind of like, are you sure? He says, yeah, wow. I'm sure. And he told me some aspects that aren't known. And he said, there's some things I cannot tell you that this guy can't tell because he's afraid if somebody else reported that they know who this guy was. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't want things to get to specify exactly who he is. He's nervous about that, and for a good cause, for a good reason. So that's the closest that I've ever been to a giant. Is that I know somebody that knows somebody that was there and involved. Mm-hmm. He gave me some interesting details that I'm going to add to the exhibit that most people don't know. Nothing that'll give this guy away, of course, but yeah.
Well, we've heard it. I mean, we brought on a guy from in Afghanistan who got one on a therm.
I've met two guys from Afghanistan that saw them through therm. How did he just saw it, or did he record it?
Well, he didn't know the therm had a recording technology. It was early on.
It was like day one of like new tech Overwatch, and he didn't realize he could film it.
How can these things be in Afghanistan? Like, where are their skeletons, right? Yeah.
Well, there's still these giant graves there that have been there forever, and they're up in the mountains. And I think a lot of these cryptids either they go down into the earth, because a lot of them say they smell like sulfur. Either they come out of they're either down near the Earth's core, or they're just living in caves for months on end, and then they come out.
Yep.
Do you think that's where they go?
I've talked to two witnesses that had run-ins with them in caves. one down in Jasper. But then I've read other books, other stories of people having run-ins with caves, in caves as well. And it's funny how you mentioned that. I thought the exact same thing. It smelled like sulfur. And I thought, that's down in the earth. These things are coming out. Some of these things are actually coming out from the earth. I talked to a lady in South Georgia that her dogs, she was on her four-wheeler, and the dogs were in the front yard barking across the street. And there's one of those power line cutouts that go through the woods up the hill. And it's all mowed down. It's all flat. And the power lines just go off into the distance. She said, my dog's barking. She's like, what in the world are you barking at? And all of a sudden, this thing sits up out of the ground and stands up. And it's looking over, not too far from where I'm at. There's a peach orchard. It stands up, just looking over towards the peach orchard, and then turns and walks off in the woods. She goes, maybe it was sleeping there. I go, it's kind of a weird place for it to be sleeping, right? She says, but the dogs are barking. It just sat up right out of the ground, like it was laying there. The grass was kind of high, wow. So I guess it could have been. But I always said, just in the back of my mind, I kept going, just sat up out of the ground. I interviewed, Matt Johnson? Dr. Matt Johnson. You probably heard of him. I want to tell you this little story. And he told me a story. And then Adam Davies and John Carlson had a profound run-in. Are you familiar with that story? Bigfoot's in the portal. They're on Matt Johnson.
Okay.
So I go to a Georgia Bigfoot convention, probably, 10 years ago, I guess. And I'm there with my wife, and there's some great speakers there. And behind me, there's this big dude sitting. As soon as I turn around, I knew who he was. That's Dr. Matt Johnson that had the run-in with the Bigfoot out in Oregon at the Oregon Caves National Park. And his story was he saw Bigfoot walk from one tree to another when he was with his family. And I knew the original investigator, Scott Taylor, and I met Scott on an expedition in Washington State, and a super smart guy. He worked for Boeing. He was an engineer for Boeing, did wing stress, super knowledgeable guy, very interesting guy. So I call him, hey, Matt's here. Can you believe it? I'm at the Georgia convention, and Matt is here from Washington or Oregon in Georgia. What are you talking about? I knew what happened because he'd been on a couple TV shows telling a story. So I go, what are you talking about? He says, I'm the original investigator. Tell Matt that you're a friend of mine and ask him what really happened. I thought, how interesting. I'm still kind of a newbie at this. So there was a little break, and I turn and I go, hey, Matt, I'm Dave Bakara. I'm a BFR investigator here in Florida. And Scott Taylor, he goes, oh, yeah, Scott. Yeah, Scott's a good friend of mine. I go, yeah, that's just Scott. He said it was okay for you to tell me what really happened. Tell me the real story. I'm not prepared for what this guy's about to tell me. And Matt Johnson, he's an ex-basketball player. He is like 6'8", huge man. And a big dude, and his wife's with him. And as soon as I ask him that, I go, hey, John, tell me what happened. And he goes, I'm like, what's going on here? And he spins back and he starts to get emotional. His wife's rubbing his back. I'm like, what's happening here? I'm thinking, what's happening? And he goes like this. And I can see your tears welling in his eyes. I'm like, holy crap, what have I got myself into? Matt is a clinical psychologist for family psychology. He's a smart guy. He says, do you really want to know what really happened? I said, yeah. He says, I'm walking with my family, and I can hear this thing walking. I know that's part of the story. I can hear it tracking us in the woods. I can hear something. I don't know what it was. And I stop and I look. I tell my family, shh, there's something tracking us in the woods. This goes on. Then I don't hear it for a little while. He says, I have a call in nature. He says, wait here on the trail. He bounces up the hillside to do his business. He says he's doing his business, and he's looking down at his family, keeping an eye on them. And he sees movement over to his right. He looks over, and he sees this patch of shimmering, whatever. Something is shimmering. And all of a sudden, the shimmer in there is standing this Bigfoot. And it's looking directly at his family. He says, I see this thing, and I go, like that, like, and this thing turns and looks at me and makes a face like, man, it can see me. And it looks back at his family, and then it just shimmers right back out again. So it didn't walk from tree to tree. And it took him a long time to tell me this because he was catching his breath. He was trying to, he says, David, I try so hard I know the human brain. I can't stop from reliving this when I tell you this. But he said that's what really happened. It didn't walk from tree to tree. I just said that because I was afraid people couldn't handle it. It shimmered. It was there, and then it went visible, and I could see it. It saw me, and then it went invisible again.
Like the Predator.
Of course, I've heard that since then. That, my wife and I talked about that all the way home. All the way back to Florida, we talked about that. I was messaging Matt Johnson, some other developments that happened. I believe him when he said that that's exactly what he said during the day. That's what he saw. Wow. And then he took Adam Davies and John Carlson to his Southern Oregon habituation area. And I got this directly from Adam and John Carlson when they were sitting there at night and they saw a little pinpoint of light at the beginning of the campground. Then it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then two little beings jumped out with glowing red eyes. And they're like, what's going on here? And these things would charge them. And Adam Davies and John Carlson, all they had was a flashlight because Matt says you can come, but you can't bring any weapons. So all they could do was they would hit him with these flashlights to light him up, and the whole scene would dissipate. And they'd be gone. And 10 minutes later, it'd all start over again. Little light, and then we get back up, and these two little beings with red eyes would jump out, and they were like charging these two guys. And before they get there, would they just shine the flashlights on them, and the whole thing would just dissipate. They did it like 3 or 4 times. And both guys had the exact same story. Both guys were not looking for this. They were just there looking to have interactions with Bigfoot, not with portals, not with horrible little 3-foot hairy creatures that had red eyes that looked like they were going to try to kill them. So I've heard it all. And I've heard it all from honest, good people. And I know there's more to this, way more to this than they're telling us on TV. I can assure you that.
Yeah, there's little people all the way to giants.
I knew this was coming.
Yep.
Nate loves talking about the little people.
The little people are hard to see because they're way down there.
I've talked to two hunters that have seen him. One on Sugar Mountain. Him and his buddy were hunting, and they're just soft walking through the woods, and they can hear something in the woods. They think it's a deer. And as they come to a clearing, they look up. There's two little. He said, "I can't believe what we're seeing. There's two little people, long black hair, real tan bodies, and they were wearing like animal skin clothes." He said, "At first we thought they were kids, and they were like rolling, they were like wrestling with each other in the grass." And he said, "We're sitting there, and it didn't take us very long to understand what we were actually seeing. We're not little Indian children. These were little people from the old Cherokee legend, little people." And he said, all of a sudden, these things were little. They didn't have any weapons. We got the fear of God in us. He came all the way to the museum to tell me a story. I met another hunter that saw one with a dowsing rod, walking in a field, and another one behind him with his hand on its shoulder, walking around dowsing, looking for something. And the same thing, it did. Neither one of them knew these little people knew that the people were looking at them. Yeah. And they said, I knew I was seeing something I was supposed to be seeing. And both these guys they were hunting, they were armed when they saw these things, and they said that they were scared to death of these two little people.
Well, yeah, that cognitive dissonance kicks in, and it's a paralyzing fear. It just kind of takes over because you're seeing something. That's what happened to me when I saw it. I was just like, I'm the youngest. I got older brothers and sisters, and I'm like, I didn't have that kind of imagination, And I'm just like, I did like a triple take. I can't believe I'm seeing what I'm seeing right now. And by the time it kicks in, then you just like panic, fight or flight, and you just I screamed and ran. And
how many times did you see it?
Just once.
Oh, that's enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, but those are the 80s when we had all those weird movies. Mm-hmm. Just a lot of creepy stuff in the 80s. Just a lot of strange films. And I like I said, I had older siblings.
Some Stranger Things in the 80s, right?
Oh yeah, like Pan's Labyrinth and Neverending Story and stuff like that. Right. We had these just weird Flight of the Navigators. Yeah, but so you just I'm telling myself. I remember thinking, I've watched too many movies. I am seeing something. I'm seeing the big bad wolf outside my beer. I remember my dad. We had a fireplace. He's like, "Go get some wood," and I'm like 12 years old. I'm like, I ain't going out there. He's like, "What are you scared of?" I'm like, "You don't even know, Dad. Who knows what's." Did
you ever tell your dad?
I told my parents, but they didn't. I don't think they had. They didn't have any context for what I was describing. It wasn't until I started listening to Dogman encounters, until I was in my 30s, that I was like, oh my, I saw one of these things. I put it out of my mind for years because I remember the fear, and then I remember not wanting to look out the back window. But it, so many people say that on our show. They have this experience, and then they have this conversation with themselves. They tell themselves, oh, you didn't see that. That didn't happen. That doesn't exist. And then some other things happen in their life, and then they come around to it, and they're like, okay, this actually happened to me, and I'm willing to talk about it. But we all do that, right? But, it's interesting because you talk about panic, and you talk about just the idea of the word came from this cryptid creature in the woods, Goat Man, that would literally give you an anxiety attack, and that's where we get that word. So it's old. The language comes from these terrifying moments, especially that, and there's those famous Dogman encounters in the French countryside, and that was documented. That thing killed 30 or 40 people in this village. So it's not a new thing. It's been going on a long time, and just where do these things come from? I guess we need to start a museum, Luke.
Yeah,
when we get all Tennessee.
Just a Tennessee chapter. That's right.
Because people just show up. That's pretty cool, though, that people, come up and tell you all this stuff, and they trust you.
But my wife used to have the logo on her card. She took it off. She's like, I can't take it anymore. She would just go to pick up lunch for the staff. She'd be in a hurry.
So people keep telling me weird things.
Yeah, that's what happened. She goes, Dave, they stopped me in the parking lot, and they wanted to tell me I got hot food. Oh, and it's never a short story, Jack. These poor people that have seen these, once they find an ear that will listen to them and trust them, they go over it and over it and over it. And you can't, same thing like you, when you finally get, I'm sure the same thing has happened to you. When you finally get somebody to listen to you, you get to get it off your chest. Unfortunately, the poor people would catch my wife in the middle of a parking lot on a busy Saturday, holding 2 bags of food, and it's 98 degrees outside. And they just want to tell her all about it. So she had to take the logo off so she could go about her business.
She's like, Dave's hungry.
Yeah.
I can't listen to your Dogman story.
Yeah, we this last 2 weeks, I think we've gotten more stories emailed to us than on our entire podcast because we've been airing some stuff. And we're finally getting to that place where it's unmanageable, and it's starting to happen to us a little bit. Podcast is a little different, something about just pulling off the side of the road and walking in and just feeling like, okay, I can say what I need to say. There's a lot of places on the internet, a lot of paranormal shows now, a lot of places where you can, if you have a story and it's burning a hole in your mind, you can find a place. But we appreciate you, coming on our podcast and tell our listeners where, if they want to come in and talk to you directly, where they can find you.
So I'm not at the museum every day because now I've got a little hobby farm, and I have other things I'm doing as well. So, but we're open 7 days a week. So I'm in there every day, but I collect the garbage and I get the cardboard, and I'll sometimes be stocking some stuff in the back room. But if you go there to the museum, or you can contact me on our Facebook page, go to Expedition Bigfoot Facebook page, and you can DM me there. But on that page, you can see all the stories. And mind you, all the stories that I've put on there over the past 7 years, that's a tiny fraction of the stories we get. Because sometimes I only do 1 story a week. Sometimes it's maybe 2 a month. But I'm actually getting 100 a month. I just cover the more interesting ones that have a stranger aspect that make you think. For every story you see on there, there's probably 100 that I have not put on there. I have piles and piles of these. And some of them from police officers, especially local police officers, I don't put them on there.
Right.
I'm sitting on some big stories where Bigfoots have killed people from local EMTs. I can't talk about it. Yeah. I don't need the aggravation. I've gone through and purged out of the files. I've talked to people that have been there, and there's just no point. I don't have anything to back it up with. I know the person that was there that saw the whole thing happen or saw the aftermath. But there's just stories I don't talk about because I not only do I have anything to back them up, but it's just better. Some things are just better left unsaid.
This next episode, Dave, we'll have David Bakara, no relation, on to share some stories.
Exactly. No, we get that all the time. We've disguised some voices, and we've had several people change their names.
Mhm.
So we understand that completely. And we're not even, I guess we're getting there, but for a while there, it's just like, it's not a big deal, like you'll be fine. And then now I'm kind of like, I understand it more and more, the privacy aspect of it. And especially, we live in a world with a narrative. And if it doesn't go with the narrative.
Boy, that's a truth. I've always said that if something ever happened where somebody knocked on my door, was just sick of hearing my voice, somebody up in the government and say, "Hey, you want to know what's going on here? Come here." Get in a car, and they take me down to some place, and they say, "Sit down," and they spend 3 hours explaining to me what these things really are, what these dogmen really are, where they come from, how long they've been here, what the relation to us is, where we really come from. This is how humans really came, we didn't evolve here, and this is what brought us here. Okay, all right, here's a cup of coffee. Jim's going to give you a ride home, and they drop you off at home. They say, "Go tell anybody you want to tell." You would probably sit there and go, "There's nobody I can tell."
There's no.
I'm
I'm gonna sit on this one for a little while.
and then you'll be one of those guys that wish you didn't know what you know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be able to sleep anymore. And I think you could actually get to that point. You could actually get to the point where, like, man, I wish I didn't know that, because I love my kids and my grandkids terribly.
Mm-hmm.
And I let anybody know that if anybody brought a body here, I say, get that thing out of here.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to ruin your life. There's a reason these things are kept quiet, and they probably have a good reason to keep them quiet. And I will not be the guy to bust the doors open and go, "Hey, look what we got here."
Dave, if that happens, shoot us a message and I'll give you Nate's address. Ship it on up to Nate's house.
Yeah, you guys can have that.
No, it's actually,
I'll be out.
our show could keep going and your museum could keep going. There is a little bit of benefit to having it still remain a mystery. So
There really is.
there is.
Yeah,
But the museum is Expedition Bigfoot. You're in Blue Ridge, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening and you're traveling through the Blue Ridge Mountains, you definitely need to stop in. Maybe you see David doing some chores. You can grab him and tell him your story. This has been fantastic. It's so great. It's so great to talk to somebody, because you forget that as we do stories on here and they're anecdotal, it's a single person point of view, that there are the scribes and the people that are keeping record.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave, you're doing that, which I love. You're compiling and you're archiving. It's the word I was looking for. All these stories, and I think as you go down the mountain of evidence, I think you can sharpen and really, in a sense, really pinpoint your opinion on things that are an enigma, right? And I like what things you have to say, because I think that's kind of where we've gotten in the show, is being like, there's just too many weird things that happen around this creature. And then you get to Dogman, it gets even weirder, and you go, there's too many just strange things for this to be, a relic hominid, or it's all just a hallucination. Those kind of things are just really, those are knee-jerk visceral reactions to people that don't want to confront perhaps what the truth is. So we're grateful for what you're doing and recording and the work you're doing. And as you say, I hope that this thing continues to grow for you. Excited about your new ventures. As you said, you're going to be doing a museum that talks about Dogman, Kandahar Giant, UFO experiences, to kind of unwrap some of those mysteries as well. And so,
when that opens,
to you announcing that,
I'll let you know.
You can come back on, and we appreciate it, because Luke and I have been making a case. There's many blurry creatures out there, and especially a lot of people like just to label it all one thing, and you sit there and the data continues to come at you. You have to confront the data. And I like that about you. It takes a certain type of mind, like more of a scientific mind. Like, I'm going where the data goes. I can't just, explain these things away. And we try to tell Christians all the time, like, hey, there's more than just demons out there. There's a lot. And they get mad at us because we try to explain. There's a hierarchy of all kinds of stuff. And that's okay. You don't have to lose your faith because there's more than demons out there, And
I agree 100%. God is much bigger than they're telling us he is.
Yeah.
We are not the apex of creation. As I tell people, don't forget, a couple hundred years ago, we were still wiping our butts with our hands. Don't forget that, right? I think
some of us
he's got
still
higher
are.
aspirations than us. Somebody's probably started something somewhere else few hundred, maybe a few thousand years ago. They're a little further ahead of us. So,
Right.
yeah,
Us more advanced, you were bidet guys, you just move past even the toilet paper.
that's right.
The ancient bidet.
I love it. I love it. This has been great, Dave. Thanks so much for the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Good to be here. Well, thanks, guys. It was good to talk
Yeah.
to you.
Good talking to you too.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Take care now.
All right.
All right, man.
Bye.
I'll see you at the museum.